Hi there, and welcome to the latest edition of Cool People. Now, what's Cool People, you may ask? Well, if you haven't watched this before, well, I'm transgender, and over the last couple of years, I came out very publicly as being trans, and I've been doing a lot of public speaking, a lot of trans awareness training. And when I've been going to events where I've been doing the public speaking, I've been meeting a lot of other amazing people who have got incredible stories to tell, not just trans people, all sorts of diverse people. And one of the people who I actually shared a stage with was my friend Sandra Pollock, who's with me today. And she's a lovely person. She's got an incredible story to tell. She's a multi-award-winning entrepreneur. She's a leadership consultant. She's a coach, trainer, and mentor. And she's also founder of the Women's Awards. So she does lots of amazing things. So welcome, Sandra.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No, you're very, very welcome. So just wondered if you'd like to just tell us a little bit about your life, and so how you started off and how you came to now being founder of the Women's Awards. I mean, it's been quite a journey for you, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I feel like one of those people that have had several lifetimes all in one. Seriously.
Mine's probably been a bit more extreme than yours.
You may be surprised. Yeah, I think that I'm not someone that has in the past really told my story. No. I'm probably more focused on what is that I want to achieve. How can I help people? How can I improve things? How can I, change situations for the better? And very much in the past, I haven't spoken about me at all. And even if I put stuff out there, it has been very ordered. It's been, what do I want people to know more than about me and about my life and about my history? However, recently I have been thinking, well, actually, maybe I should share more about myself, because people by people, we know that already. People connect with people or they don't. And even if you've got something that could transform someone's life, if they don't connect with you, they very seldom are interested in what you have. And in terms of, if I look at the messages that I give to my clients when I work with them, it's always about, let people find out about you. So I thought, it's about time I sort of took my own medicine and shared who I am, mainly to help people understand more about who I am and why I do what I do. It's within more recent years that I've actually been confident enough in my own self to share my story. And that's because my story has been, my journey so far, my history has been quite difficult. And most people will be surprised when they find that out, because it's not something that I have, as I said, shared. And I think the other reason why I haven't in the past shared my story and all the difficulties is because I didn't want to embarrass my family. Because I've had a very, very difficult childhood, and as much as that has been difficult, and if the story came out, I would feel that people would blame my family, or in particular my mother, and I didn't want that to happen. So I think the freedom that all of the chains came off, I guess, when my mother passed a few years ago, because I felt as she's not here to be impacted from the different ideas and views that people would have hearing the story or hearing about my journey. But I guess the starting point was, like many of us, my start in life here was to a family who always struggled to keep food on the table, to have a roof over their heads. My mother worked maybe, several jobs, maybe sometimes 3 jobs, which would include 2 jobs out of the house and in the house, making, as a piece worker, making sewing and making things or putting things together. So our life, there was always a concern. You felt that, even if you couldn't articulate it to the child, you felt that as you were growing up. So as I was growing up, so that brought stresses to my family. My mother, I take after her in a lot of ways. She was a pioneer. She was always interested in what else can she learn, what else can she do, that sort of stuff. So she was always one with the ideas. She would share those with my dad. He wasn't as forward thinking as she was, and couldn't always see it. And he would be more, well, my friends aren't doing that, why do we need to do that? Even from the point of view of sort of buying a house, I remember, and this is stuff you hear about this as a child, you weren't involved in the conversations, but I remember knowing quite clearly that my mum was trying to save money up for a deposit for a house. Her idea, I think she told my dad, let's buy a house. And I think it was because it was quite difficult. If you're moving with a family every 6 months or every 12 months, you've got to move, you've got to find another house, or, the difficulties. So she wanted to settle. As a child, we moved quite a lot, and I lost contact with my friends at school. You'd make friends, and then 6 months later, 12 months later, you'd be moving. And even if it wasn't moving very far, and this was in London, even if you weren't moving very far as a child, it seemed like you were moving miles and miles. You were moving to another country almost, because you had no means of contacting. There wasn't the internet or mobile phones and all that sort of stuff then. So quite frequently I lost touch with my friends, and that impacted me quite a lot, which, coming forward quite a few years, when I had my own daughter, I worked hard at staying in the same place so that she would be able to maintain contact with people her own age continually. Anyhow, going back to my childhood. So she wanted to settle down, I guess, and she had said to my dad, let's save some money and buy a house. So she would, whatever money she got, she would scrimp, she would scrape, she would put money together. In those days, women couldn't, it was difficult for a woman to have her own bank account without her husband's approval. So clearly she was saving all of this money, and it may not have seemed like a lot of money at the time. 500, 600 pounds is in the back of my head. It may have been more, but that is a figure I've always had in the back of my head. So just for a deposit. So they had to save this money. I've always heard my mom saying, when everybody else was eating, proper beef and meat and all that sort of stuff, we were eating corned beef, sort of thing in the can. So she saved this money up and had enough money to have a deposit. And then my dad decided, none of my friends buying a house. Why do we want to have a house? I think we should have a car. So he took the money and bought a car. And clearly, my mother was not happy. And you could see that she had more ambition, more forward thinking than my dad did. So those pressures were always impacting. The money issue was always a thing in our growing up. My dad was much more stable. If you think about, somebody who stayed in the same job all of his life, then that was my dad. My mum, on the other hand, was someone who's always trying different things. And I take after my mum. My sister, who's older than me, takes after my dad. She has been in the same job for all of her life. And even if she's done other things, she's done them for a longer period of time. So I think my childhood has impacted heavily. Those who know me will understand now, impacted on me heavily in terms of what I've done and the many, many things that I've done. But there are also other things that have impacted on me in terms of who I am as a person. And I think seeing this and experiencing this both in my family's life, my mother's life in particular, and in my own life, where you know that you are skilled, you are competent, but you don't get the opportunities, and the opportunities are not coming your way. out of no other reason other than that because you have brown skin and or you are female. And those are things that have impacted on me throughout my life. And I've seen a huge difference personally. Obviously, my sister and I were born in London. My parents were Barbadian. And although we went to Barbados quite often on holiday, we did, going on holiday and living there is a completely different thing. So when my mother had just had enough of the struggles of being a Black woman in this country and not getting the opportunities, doing all the qualifications, doing all the training, but not getting those opportunities, I think she got to a point, and that impacted on how she treated us. I came up in a very abusive environment, and now that I'm older, I can see that it is because of the pressures that my parents were dealing with day in and day out, which impacted on their relationship. But if you were constantly struggling to find, money for just basic needs all of the time, and you can know and you can see that there is no other reason other than the color of your skin or your gender, that can wear you out after a while. So I think when I was about 10, 11, my mom decided she wanted to move back for her Barbados, and live there. And I would say that I saw, even not completely being able to articulate it, living in a country that's predominantly, you have people that are like predominantly Black. Barbados is sort of multicultural, but more Black people there. And you're given opportunities based on your ability, not the color. I'm sure that this does exist in certain levels, even in Barbados. But I felt that as an individual, I got the opportunities given to me were based on just who I am, my skills, my abilities, my aptitudes, those sorts of things. So I've had the opportunity to see that difference quite clearly. So that has been influential, and we probably don't have enough time to go into sort of when I sort of come back to the UK, but and seeing the difference again. And even I've worked for myself for 12, nearly 13 years now, and even here in this country, even now, I am highly qualified in a whole series of things: leadership and management, HR, adult education, training, all of that sort of stuff, and more. Things that I don't, NLP and Reiki, and you name it, all sorts of things that I don't necessarily share with people. However, I still, and I'd love someone to tell me that I get this wrong. But when you go forward for opportunities, there is still that feeling that I have to be 2-3 times more capable to even get a consideration in this country now. So you talk about change. Yes, there has been change, but sometimes there's still that undercurrent of, how good are you? Can you really be that good? Because of the color of your skin or because of your gender. So I guess I'm sharing all these things so that you can see why I work in some of the ways that I work. So, that's been one thing that has influenced, I guess, my psyche and why I do what I do. Then I get the other opportunity, the other side of things, when I look back to my own life and the stronger influences. And I share this story, and you've heard this story before, and I'll share it here again. But what I'm very, very, and have always been strongly influenced by helping other people to become the best that they can be. And that's quite a cliche these days, and loads of people say it. But I had that strong inner desire long before the concept of coaching ever came into reality. And that, I believe, came from how I saw both my mother's life and how my own life has moved forward from a child. And one of the so this story was one of the instances that I've shared before, in that I'm walking home from school. It's an absolutely glorious day. The weather is warm, it's hot, and I have about an hour between when school finishes and I get home. But as long as I get home within an hour, then there'll be no questions, there'll be no concerns. So I have an hour and I'm walking home. I've chosen to walk home this day. I can get on the bus, but I can also walk home. So I've decided to walk home, and there's actually a reason why I've decided to walk home. And I'm walking on the road, and in Barbados at the time there's not many pavements, so you're actually walking in the road. So I'm walking along, and I'm really thinking about an envelope that I have in my hand. I have this brown envelope, sort of A5 shape size envelope that I've been given from my teacher. And the thing about this envelope, that I know that in this envelope is the results for the year, for my school year, how I've done. Now, I think in my head, I'm walking along and I'm thinking, well, okay, I want to see what's in this envelope. And I'm thinking to myself, well, can I steam it open? And my sister used to talk about steaming envelopes open. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I could steam it open and get to read what's in it before my mother does. But then I think, well, okay, if I steam it open, how do I get it closed?
Yeah.
And I'm sort of picking how to get closed again. I'm picking at the sides of it, trying to see if I can lift it up in any way without tearing it. Because I know that if I open it before she does, well, that is a beating. And, people now, they have no idea what a beating is, a beating with anything she could put her hands on. And I'm walking along and I'm thinking, and I'm dragging my feet, because in the back of my head, I'm conscious that I have an hour, but I'm also not wanting to get home, because I know what's going to happen when I get home. Anyhow, cut a long story short, I get home, and as I go in the kitchen door, the side door, I can see her in front of me at the other end of the kitchen, and she's got a huge, we brought with us from England, a huge machine, like a factory type machine, where she would do her sewing and all that sort of stuff. So her back's to the door, her face is to the wall, and she, uses this machine. And I come through the door, and she doesn't even look around. She's just like, where's this envelope? So I didn't even get a chance to sneak in and consider stealing.
What envelope? I don't know envelope.
So I walk over to her, and I have carried this envelope in my hand all the way home, trying to talk to this envelope to open it itself. So I give her the envelope, and I stand there. I don't have permission to move. I have to stand there. So she takes the envelope, she opens it, the envelope's open, and she reads, and I can see her reading. I'm trying to look at her to see any sort of reaction on her face to get an idea of what is contained in this letter that she's opened. And I'm so busy in my thoughts. I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, now I believe I've done well. So I'm not concerned about the results. What I'm concerned about is the commentary, what the teachers have written, against all of the different topics. Because as you know, with the school reports, every teacher gets an opportunity to put a comment. I'm more concerned about the commentary. And so I am busy thinking about my teachers and thinking about which one would have put what and all of this sort of thing. And so I don't see it coming. I just hear this bang, this clap, and I find myself flying across the other side of the room. And And before I know what, I'm hitting the floor. I'm scrambling to try and get myself up and almost to sort of see where she is and where she's coming from so that I can move out of the way, because I know that there's going to be another blow coming somewhere. And all I can hear is, I don't send you to school to talk. I send you to school to work. I send you to school to learn. And the envelope's chucked on the floor, the letter's chucked on the floor, and I'm scrambling up, trying to, and I catch this thing, and I scramble up and I duck out of the way, because, as I always say, my mother was a ninja. She's a ninja mother. She was the quickest person I have ever known, but I'm a ninja's daughter, so so I have to get out of the way. So I managed. That was just clout across the head. I can hear the ringing in my ears still as I scramble up, grab the letter and the envelope, and I get out of there. And that was lucky because it was only one clout. So I get to my room and I sit down, crying obviously by now, and I look at the contents, and I'm first. I come first in every single subject. Absolutely first in every single subject. But all my mother was concerned about was a comment that I talk too much, or I don't pay attention. And so that sort of, I reflect on that, because I think to myself, as a child, I thought to myself, well, there's absolutely nothing I can do that will satisfy the needs being required if you're coming first in every subject, and she would be invited year after year. There would be presentation evenings. She'd be invited, to the school to celebrate, obviously, my achievements, and she would, and I would get all sorts of books and trophies and whatnot. But that it didn't appear to be of interest. And, but I would hear her talking to her friends on the telephone saying how great her Sandy was. She did well in school. She did that. But to me,
she didn't do it to you.
She would never, ever, ever say that to me. And I think it was this old concept of, if I tell you how good you are, it will go to your head. So if you think about it, so I looked at, over the years, if I've gotten older, and I think, well, why did she behave in this way? And I look at her life, and she never got the attention that she needed. She never herself got to be celebrated in any way. And it was that struggle, whether it was, from her own parents, whether it was from the life itself, the community around her, she was a talented, multi-talented woman, but she never got that recognition in any area of her life. And so even as a child, I always wanted to buck that. I always wanted to buck the idea that just because traditionally things are done a certain way, that should continue, or just because culturally things were done a certain way, that should continue. And I would always question, even as a child, why do people behave this way? What has brought them to this point? And maybe, thinking about it now, maybe it was because I believed deep down in some place within my mother, she loved us. But there were so many layers upon layers upon layers of stress and concern and worry and fear that covered that love, that she could not show it in the way that she would have liked to. So maybe, rightly or wrongly, I have come up with, why do people behave the way that they do? And this has influenced the work that I do. It has influenced how I teach leadership and management, because if we can get into the motivations of people, then we become more deeper in and steeped in our understanding, but also in our desire to understand. And I think, that I believe very much that if you have understanding, you don't need forgiveness.
Mm.
Forgiveness is good, and I think we should forgive ourselves and we should forgive other people. But if you're thinking about why did she behave the way she did? It was the amount of stress and pressure and lack of recognition and lack of any sort of plus given to all of the things that she was able to do. She was an extremely bright woman, extremely bright. But she didn't get what she wanted. So for me, I'm always about finding out the motivation, what has caused people to be where they are now. And if you have that understanding, even if it's only an idea, that changes the way you react to the world around you. And it is not about changing people. It's about getting yourself to accept that people have the right to be how they are, because that's their choice. No matter what it is, at some point you have made a choice. And yes, at some point, my mother made a choice that maybe she didn't see the reason why she should work on herself. I have no idea. We really never have been able to have these sort of heart-to-heart conversations. But I know that I can, and I have, forgiven her because I've understood as much as I possibly can, the motivations that influenced her. But these are, and now I look at that life and I think, my gosh, it was awful. It was awful. And I mean, that's not even the tip of the iceberg of the life, my upbringing, how I was treated. But had I not experienced that, I'm not sure if I would have the view on the world around me and the life, and I would have achieved all the things that I have achieved. I don't know, but I'm able to be thankful that my mother was who she was, and that I am who I am, and I was able to learn from it. And if we make the choice to ask why, or to ask how come things or people are behaving the way they are, with a true openness, we can begin to explore different concepts and explore a deeper us. Sometimes it's not even about the other person, but it's who you decide to be, if that makes sense. So that has influenced all of the things that I do, because I see it all now as gifts.
Yeah.
There were I remember the couple of things even in my childhood, during the time when I lived in Barbados. I used to go to a church days, and there was a youth group at the time. And it was a really wonderful time, because I learned all the things that are my foundations now. I learned how to public speak, how to manage groups, how to be creative, and to use my own skills and talents. And at the time, we had all sorts of different people, young people involved in the youth group. And one day I got a couple of the group came to my house, rushed to me to say, oh, we need you. I can't remember the young lady's name, but she used to suffer with epileptic fits. And she'd had a fit at the time. And obviously they were looking after her as well as they could, but she was calling for me. And so I rushed off and went to where they were and spent time with her, sat with her, held her, talked to her. And she said something which absolutely blew me away. Even now, when I think back at it, I was probably about 12 years old. And she said to me, I would like to be like you when I grow up. Now, this is someone who's not very much different in terms of age than I was, maybe a year or so younger. And I thought, why? That is such an amazing thing to say to somebody. If I were going to say that to somebody, it would be somebody who's an adult, you know, much older than me. But that really hit me, and it made me realize that just in being me, because I didn't think I was being anything different, but just in being me, I was making an impact on at least one person's life. But to take that back a few years before that, and as I said earlier on, we moved from London, England to Barbados when I was around 10, 11. And that was a culture shock for me in lots and lots of different ways. I've written several poems and stories about that time. I should share them with you sometime.
Yeah.
But it was a culture shock. And one of the things that my sister and I feared was that there was no social services. Not that social services here were any use to young Black children at the time. I don't know if it's improved any now, but there was nobody that you could talk to if you were being abused at home. And she would always tell us, don't worry, when you go to Barbados, no welfare state, no social services, so I can do what I like. And she did. But what the culture change was that, number one, as I said before, the good thing was I could see people like myself and I could be recognized for my skills, my abilities, and that was really good. But there was this, nobody took care of any sort of in-house abuse or home abuse or anything like that. But because I felt so unloved at the time, because all I would get was the abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, verbal, abuse as I was growing up. And I remember thinking to myself that nobody loved me. There was no help. There was nobody I could go to. Even people in the family, they would try and talk to my mum, but they really couldn't do anything. And so I was in a dark place a lot of the time. And I remember contemplating taking my own life because I couldn't see any way out. I had no way of looking after myself, buying my food, housing myself, sheltering myself, keeping myself safe. And there was nobody else that could do that for me or felt that they could do that for us. And so I contemplated ways out. And I'll be honest, I sat down, I thought about how I could cobble things together in a glass and drink it. I thought about, hanging myself. I thought about cutting my wrist. I thought about all of those things. And I'm not making light this, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm making light. No, I sat down and contemplated these things seriously.
What sort of age were you then when that
I was, as I say, this was 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, because I couldn't see a way out. I mean, my sister and I ran away from home, but where do you go? Yeah. Where do you get food? Yeah. Eventually, you have to go back.
Yeah.
And so in that mental torture, with seeing no way out. I don't know if you can hear my cat meowing through this.
Okay. I was going to say, it's funny, I've got a cat that's just down here at the moment. He's sitting just right on the sofa next to me, and he's asleep at the moment.
Okay. Well, Billy's outside, and so he can see me, but obviously I'm doing this, so I can't stop. And see, he's like, why don't you just open the door? What's the problem?
Well, this is why my cat's here, because if I close the door, he'd be scrabbling at the door and he'd be clawing at the carpet and he'd be making a right noise. So that's why I thought, just let him in. So.
Yeah. So we could take a break and I could go let him in. But I just wondered if you could hear him. Should we just take a second?
Yeah,
and
no problem at all.
Let him in? Okay. All right. Just excuse me. I'll be back. Okay. Right. So we've let the cat in, so we can get back to this now. So yeah. So through all of my childhood, I was in this mental torture. So being a chicken, and I've had so much pain in my life. I know what pain is. I know what physical pain is, emotional pain. And I think maybe there's more to it, but the thing that stopped me from proceeding with all of these ideas that I'd sit down and think about was the idea of pain. I didn't want to be in pain. So I think, well, maybe if I drank something that'd be painful going down, maybe if, I'd done some other of those alternatives, it would be painful, I would suffer, all of those things. So that, I'll be honest, is the reason why I'm still here.
Wow.
But I had to find a way. I had to find a way out. I had to find a way. And I didn't understand this at the time, but I had to find a way of taking control where I could. So as I listed for you, there were so many things that I didn't have control over. And it came to me one day. I remember sitting in my room thinking about this and thinking, well, I know what I have control over that nobody can take away from me. And that was my mind. My mind, my thinking. And so there at that age, where it was 11, 12, whatever, I sat there and I thought a few things. Well, if nobody else is going to love me, I'm going to love me. And if nobody else is going to take care of me, I will take care of me in the area of my existence or my being that I could. And that was my mind. And I think knowing that I was intelligent, knowing that I was bright at school, actually was the thing that helped with that, because it was the one area that I knew I could work with. Yeah. How I thought and what I thought. So from an early age, I would do a lot of personal development. That word didn't exist in my life. Mm-hmm. I would just read lots of things. I would watch people. And when I saw people doing things that I thought was good in my assessment of life, then I would try and imitate those things. I would watch how people behaved and reacted. I remember, there was a family member who died. And I can remember about three days before this person died, if that many, there was this argument going on in the house, and this was distant family. We were at other families at the time, and they were talking about this person and how horrible this person was and how they didn't like this person and blah, blah, blah. And they were going on. And then the person died a couple of days later, or it seemed like a couple of days later to me as a child. And all of a sudden, this person was so lovely. They were saying how wonderful and how thoughtful they were. And I was there as a child thinking, what a load of liars you are, because that's not what you were saying a few days ago. Yeah. And in my youthful ignorance, belief that, young people, we know better, I thought, I am not going to be like that. I don't like that. I just be honest. If the person has done or said something, then deal with that and move on. But don't be two-faced. And that was one of the things that also influenced me, just seeing how different people are when they are in front of people and when they're not. And there's, just different things in my childhood that come back to me and have over the years. I can remember as a baby standing in the cot, watching the world go round, go past, as my mum would put me in the cot because she had things to do, and she'd be interacting with the rest of the family and doing things around the house. And again, I'm a watcher. I watch and I learn and I assimilate. And this is, I guess, what has brought me into all of the things that I do, the leadership management, the training and development, the coaching, and it's all around helping people to be the best that they can be in whatever it is that they're working on. It may be your relationships with your family. It may be, your relationship with yourself, because sometimes that is where the issue is, our relationship within ourselves, and accepting who we are, and learning to be our best selves for ourselves, not for anybody else, but for ourselves. So I guess I've shared a potted history to who I am, and all of the influences that I have picked up and I have experienced, or some of them that I have experienced, that have formulated my thinking, my views on life, my philosophy in some regard, because I do believe that we are amazing beings. And we can be amazing at any point in our lives, at any point in our day. And all it's about making a decision to be. So if I could, at the age of 11, decide that I am going to be someone that when I look myself in the mirror, I actually like that person. I am going to be someone who's not living in regret. And that doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes, but it's how you deal with that. I'm going to be someone who likes myself. And that's an ongoing journey. That's an ongoing journey. But there was nothing else that I had to work with. I only had myself and my mind and my thinking. And this is something that I share. The power we have is based in our thinking, and understanding how we think and how thinking impacts on our behavior, our attitude, and what we achieve and what we don't achieve. And that is really, in a nutshell, what I work with people. No matter what it is that you're doing, it is your mindset and your thinking. Yes, you need to learn how to in lots of different ways, but you have the power. So as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old child, I made that one decision, I think, that has been a catalyst for everything else that I do. So, I also am founder of the East Midlands Women's Awards, which you mentioned, and that is based on the same thing. If you think about it, women are so amazing. So a men is not an anti-man thing, but it's about balancing the scales a little. And unfortunately, we still live in a time where women are not paid as well as they should. They don't get the opportunities all the time. They don't get the recognition. And so the awards is a place, an environment where we want to celebrate what women do. We want to identify it. So this is where it comes in, where people nominate a woman for whatever you see her doing, so that we can share that with everybody else. We can get her the recognition. And if you talk to so many people that have been nominated and also that have won, and you see how their lives have changed, the recognition, the attention, and the opportunities that have come their way. And so the awards are about bringing that balance for both genders. There is an award for men, inspirational man supporting women. And that is because to bring about change, we all have to be involved with that. Absolutely. It is not just one gender that can make that happen, but we do have to tip the scales a little on the side of women. So that, again, if you look back to my roots and to where I've come from, it's about bringing that equality. And when I look back to my mother and I feel for the pressure and the stress and the fear and the instability that her life presented, I want to, recognize her even in that, because I want to change our future by recognizing the past, changing the present, and bringing change to the future. So that's a little of me.
Well, thank you, Sandra. I think several things. I think one thing, I think it's absolutely incredible that at the age of about 10 or 11, you actually recognize the fact that actually no one could influence your own brain. It's your own brain that, and I think so many people will never get that. They never realize that. And often if they do get it, it's a lot later in life and after a lot of counseling and everything as well. So to get it at that early age is...
Yes, I see that as a gift from life itself. really. And I
Absolutely.
am so grateful for that. I'm so
Absolutely,
grateful.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So that alone is just incredible, yeah. And I think you're such a strong. I think you're one of the strongest women that I know. I really do. I mean,
Wow.
it's just yeah. And I know some strong women, so yeah, yeah. It is quite incredible, and I think it's lovely the way that you told a very balanced story in the fact that you sort of recognised you know where your mum was coming from and why she did what she did, and the fact
Yeah.
that you're not sort of blaming her and just sort of angry with her. She's a product of her upbringing and where she was, where she was.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you're able to do that, because it gives a very balanced view. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And it has taken me many years to be able to share this. And I think one of the reasons why I didn't want to share it is that I didn't want to give an imbalanced view.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And I think my writing, because I write as well, has helped with that. I still have my story, and it doesn't mean that that I shouldn't share how I saw things and my fears and my stresses in that. But as I say, to balance that out, you have to understand why people behave the way that they do. And I say this all the time, and this is not new. Other people have said it, and a lot more eloquently than I have. But we're all looking for a few things. We're looking to be heard, to be seen, and to be valued.
Yeah.
And whatever people do, those are the motivations behind whatever they do, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's indifferent. Those are the motivations. So if we keep that in mind, hopefully that will help us understand. And with understanding, we are able then to release and to forgive, because I believe that forgiveness is a way of letting go. Because if we take all of those situations where people haven't treated us well for whatever reason, we're taking along this whole bag, or holds lots of strings that are attached to us, energetically or mentally or emotionally. Everywhere we're going, we're taking all that with us. So if we can get into understanding the motivations, what people, they just want to be loved. They just want to know that they are valued in this world. They just want to know that they're heard and that they're seen and they're recognized. That's what we all want. They may not go about that the right way from our perspective, but that is what they're after. So when we are able to understand, we are then able to forgive and to release. That sets them free. It sets us free to be and to find out who we are, and not to be influenced by all of those things that we have experienced. It's a journey we're all on.
Yeah, and certainly if you carry the anger with you, then it's only you that loses out. It doesn't affect anybody else. You're the one who's got to live with it. And
absolutely,
it takes quite a lot to be able to recognise that, and to actually sort of step back from it and think, okay, well, yes, I am angry about this, but for my own well-being, I need to just let it go. And sometimes it's very hard to do. It definitely is.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not at all saying it's easy, and it has taken years. And I'll share this story. A good few years ago, because there was a period of time where I had to cut my mother off. I did not talk to her at all because of the mental. It would just throw me into to mental pain and confusion. And I had my family, and I still do work really hard on my relationships and to make sure that my daughter lives in a more free environment. And so I used to call her up every now and again after a long period of just having to set her free on her own. And I remember I'd called her. It was a Christmas time, and I thought, okay, Christmas, we all get all lovey-dovey and make contact with the family and put all the issues behind us and show love and all that sort of stuff. And so I called her up. And I really called her up because I wanted her to talk to my daughter, and I wanted my daughter to talk to her, and to sort of forge this relationship between them, because there had been no relationship between the two. And so I called her up, and not even 5 minutes into the conversation, she started with, "You've not achieved anything, you're not any good, blah, 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 blah," all that sort of stuff. And I was like, for heaven's sake. You see, she was operating out of habit.
She couldn't help herself. Yeah,
she couldn't help herself. And this is the other thing around how we allow our minds to influence. We can get into a habit of behavior that even when a different scenario presents itself, we are so used to that habit that we can't help ourselves. And I remember trying really hard, and we ended up, as you can imagine, we ended up with a huge argument, and I had to say, "Look, Mum, I have to go. Yeah. I have to go." And I literally had to put after announcing that I had to go, because still it's my mother and I'm trying to be as respectful as I possibly can, I ended up having to put the phone down. And my daughter, she was 9. My daughter was 9. And she said to me, she came over and she put her arms around me and she said to me, "Mummy, I'm sorry that you don't have a nice mummy like I have."
Oh.
And yeah.
Oh, that gets you, doesn't it?
You can cry even thinking about it now.
That's powerful.
So, so there are things that I am so grateful for. The journey isn't always an easy one. Forgiveness isn't always an easy one, but it starts with just a decision in your mind.
It does. Yeah.
That I don't know how. You say to life, you say to yourself, "I don't know how, but I'm prepared to be willing to do it." That is, and life itself will bring and will take you to there. And knowing that because I made the decision to, not knowing how, but to start the process of forgiveness, has enabled my daughter to be able to live in a completely different environment and to be able to recognize what she has. And so even just sharing that story with you, I'm almost in tears to have your 9-year-old put their arm around you and say, "Mummy, I'm sorry that you don't have a nice mummy like I have."
Oh, that's just
amazing.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. And it's interesting now, and we're recording this at the time of the coronavirus pandemic, and hence talking to each other via Zoom, and it'll be interesting to see how this pandemic affects people mentally in terms of and how we're sort of treating others, because there has been a lot of kindness that you see among neighbours and people just helping each other generally, and I hope that continues afterwards. Now, I don't know whether the cynic in me thinks, "Oh no, everybody will just go back to as they were before and all out for themselves," or whether that kindness will continue. But I hope it does. I mean, have you got any thoughts about that, Sandra?
I agree with you, Katie. I absolutely hope it does. Because this shows us that even with reduced opportunity, resources, etc., that we are and we can be loving, helpful, supportive people. And I said earlier on as we were talking, I believe that inside that we are all love. Love is at the core of who we are as human beings. This is my belief, and I'm keeping it. You don't have to agree with me, but I'm keeping that. And I think situations bring out the best and the worst of us.
Yeah.
I think if we allow ourselves to be open and to say, "Okay, this is unusual. How do I deal with this?" and sort of be more open to what comes naturally and not respond from fear, then we are going to see those loving, caring, sharing opportunities and situations that we have seen all over the place. If we respond out of fear, okay, that's not who we are, but we were responding out of that because we're worried about not having enough, there not being enough, and all of that. Then we are kicking into a different mindset. And for a lot of people, that is the habitual mindset. That isn't who you are as a human being. That is who you have you've practiced being out of fear and concern.
Yeah.
For yourself predominantly, and for your loved ones. But I think that this is such an amazing opportunity to show us who we are inertly as human beings, and how we can care for strangers, even when we're told stay at home, don't touch people, blah blah blah. We can still care for strangers. And I'm fortunate in that where I live, we live in a cul-de-sac, and it's we have everybody in this area really look after each other. So
We've got the same here. I live in a cul-de-sac. It's the same sort of thing, yeah. And yeah.
We're not in each other's pockets all the time, but we know. We know. Oh, I haven't seen this person recently. We'll ask around. Oh, they're living. Oh, they've gone to stay with their daughter or their son or whoever, and we'll know what's going on. But this is how we really are. This is my belief. This is how we really are as human beings, and I think that if we want to, this can continue. But it's if we want to, and if enough of us want to, if that makes sense. And I think, yes, we've got a lot more to go in terms of the economic impact, the financial impact, and lots of other things that we're going to have to deal with. But I think if we really wanted to, there is enough resources in this world and in this country to support everybody. It's whether we are going to be brave enough to do things that are different.
Yeah, and I think it's just focused all our minds and just shown us that there's some things in life are just far more powerful than we are, and that you know it focuses on your mind on actually what is important in life, and you know your relationship with your loved ones, and you know that telling your loved ones that you love them on a regular basis is important, and it really is, isn't it? And I think you know, and it makes some you know long-standing feuds that have been going on for ages might make them think, well, actually they're pointless and they're really insignificant. Really. You know, so and the realization
that this is something unseen, you can't touch it, but it's certainly touching you.
Absolutely.
It's touching everybody around you, and that can have more control over what happens than you do. So as you say, what is valuable, what is really important comes to the fore. And I think maybe if we use this opportunity to heal those feuds that, you know, and those relationships, then moving on from here, we will come out of this, you know, completely renewed and different, and hopefully as a more loving planet. Let's hope.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I hope so. Well, thank you so much for taking part in Cool People, Sandra. I really appreciate it. And you are one hell of a cool person, I'll tell you.
Well, thank you. I think I should put that up somewhere.
Yeah, Katie do that. No, Katie said. Yeah. So
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
No, it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant. I've been really looking forward to our chat, Sandra.
Oh, thank you. Well, I hope that, you know, if someone, even one person, finds one thing that they can take away and use to bring improvement to themselves, how they think about themselves and to their lives, then it will have been worth it. And that's really how I live.
Absolutely, and I'll put your contact details on the end of this video, so if anybody viewing this wants to get in contact with you, then they can. So thanks ever so much for watching, and please catch up with me on my next edition of Cool People, because I've got a lot more cool people lined up to do. So see you soon.